This is when we were going to start our planned session on COVID-19, how it has affected our industry and what's next. Stephanie Rogers, you are there, correct?
Hello, hello.
Hey, Stephanie. So I'm going to turn things over to you. I will put myself on mute, but obviously I'll be available for whatever you need.
Well, sounds great. Well, hello, everyone. This is a great restart to our afternoon session. Is just to collect as a group. And feel free to join in on your video as well. This is really more or less a talking session for everyone on the call. And we're just curious as to how COVID-19 has affected the e-textile movement, if you will, and what's next. What are people seeing as a way to sort of accelerate this? So I think I'll kick it off as the session leader. I can tell you that some of the areas of our proposed topics come directly from my experiences. This February, I was a recipient of an IPC award for the work we've done here on the e-textile committee. And then since March, I feel like I've abandoned it because the R&D priorities of the company in which I work have changed. And we reshifted into different market sectors, different applications for PPE. And it's been very intense as we shift markets and get new customers and make new products, and very demanding. I also am not a traveler any longer, and so I travel to my home office, sit down for 15 hours a day, like many of us, I'm sure. And so I feel like we probably share a lot of the same anxieties, but more importantly, what do you think about R&D priorities and distractions at this moment? And we can kick it off, I guess, with that question.
Hey, Stephanie, your audio was a little bit choppy there at the end.
I saw no. Did just get along?
Seems to be doing better now.
Okay. So I'm going to open the floor for comments. If anyone feels like they want to speak out about what their impressions are about the e-textile initiatives that may have been going on prior to COVID and the accelerations that were planned, and how things have either been postponed or for future date. Is my audio still working?
Still a little choppy, Steph.
I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix it. Well, again, this is an open forum, and we can talk about our experiences or our expectations moving forward. I know many of us are not traveling, as I mentioned. And how do you think that is affecting the prototype manufacturing and the ability to, be a maker in hands-on space? Is the communication improving so that you can show people in other places to do various levels of work, or is it, more challenging? Chris, I see a bubble on my screen that I am having some challenges. Maybe you would like to engage the talking portion of it, unless there's a specific question I need to answer.
So I haven't seen any specific questions come in yet, Stephanie.
Okay. have this bubble on my screen because my speaker's not working.
So I guess a question that I would have is, I mean, I know that from the standpoint of the activity of our committee, we went from high level of activity through February to pretty much the committee members asking for a timeout through the summer months. There seemed to have been a lot of the, as Stephanie was saying, any of the activity or R&D that would have been in the e-textiles or smart textile sector suddenly switching over to people going and looking at different types of how to address PPE concerns and dealing with the different regulations at the state and the federal level. I'm curious to know if anybody out there has any input or any insights as to what your experiences were, any lessons learned, things like that. Okay, and I guess we're going to go to a question. Stephanie, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
Sorry, it's me, Vignesh.
Yes.
I just wanted to share what we did in Nonwovens. I'm getting feedback.
Well, we can hear you fine.
Okay. Anyway, so what we wanted to do was mainly after the lockdown started, even though it froze up a lot of our hardware development activity, we explicitly wanted to work on a face mask to monitor COVID. So we were kind of experimenting on decentralized hardware development and using online tools and tools like Miro and Slack mainly to communicate with each other. While we didn't get back to the original efficiency, I did think it did help a bit. So that was our experience anyway in our lab.
So I saw a question come in on the chat from Yolita. Yolita, did you want to speak out the question, or would you like me to read it for you?
I can speak the question. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Yolita, how are you?
Very good. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. I know on our end at Flex, we had to make use of some more collaboration tools, specifically Zoom and so forth, which we had not been using as much during the day. But since travel has really been clamped down, it's been kind of invaluable. So I was just curious, I know the gentleman earlier just mentioned Slack. Are people finding those tools useful? Has the work slowed in the prototyping, or are you just managing it differently?
Was it directed at me? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Vinyas. Yes, if you don't, if you want to answer it, sure.
Okay. Sure. No, I mean, yeah. So Slack definitely helped. There was like a steep learning curve, at least for everyone to get onboarded, for me included. But eventually, once we got the ball rolling, it came back to something resembling schedule. But I still think it's a far cry from efficiencies we gain from in-person working. So I do miss that. But at least it helps some degree of work move along. But there is a decline in productivity though on my end, at least personally.
What about simulation tools? I'm curious. I know in other engineering disciplines, simulation tools are pretty standard for simulating the mechanical properties of a material and so forth. In textile, it's more difficult to do simulations because they're composites. They have so many different features to them. Any kind of simulation tools that this group is using, including Vinyas?
I personally haven't used any of it, but sounds interesting too. But I'm hoping to hear what others have to say.
Sure. So I've had limited experience with some textile simulation tools. It's actually been a secret passion of mine to have a textile FEA tool developed. And there are companies that have attempted to do similar things, and for different reasons. Optitex is a company that can input certain textile parameters and then help drape analysis and then avatars and virtual fittings. So that's an interesting tool. And then in a more engineering sense, the company ESI group, they do a lot of manufacturing simulations and then component simulations where fabric is part of a component stack. And so I've seen some of that work done in car seats where there's a foam layer, a large foam layer, or some other kind of mechanical substrate layer. And it's a very good tool. But they are very engineering driven and it's not cheap.
No, thank you for bringing that up, Stephanie. You know, it's just something, a call out that I'm just, or call to action to this community here, is to have more simulation tools, because that can really help with the prototyping process and to keep the work going. I mean, we at our site is open for critical activities. We go in when we have to physically use a prototyping machine. But if we're doing design work, we pretty much do that at home just to keep the social distancing kind of numbers down. But I can still see this gap area in textile simulation technology, specifically when you start to want to enter characteristics, when you start to get into more complex systems, whether they're in cars or audio or on the body, you really need to put in different, mechanical characteristics like you do in mechanical engineering or electrical engineering, and that's kind of a real gap area in the textile industry.
Yes, it is. There's another entity, Keith, oh, his last name escapes me at the moment, I should know it, Keith Hoover, who has been part of this group before and other industrial fabric groups, has an organization, Black Swan Textiles, and they are very much involved in machine learning and the manufacturing 4.0 and this concept too of virtual engineering of textiles. And so it's still a very long road. I mean, ask the color industry if they virtually approve color, and very few do, but it does work. But it's still a very hard thing to grasp, and only in times like this probably is it really getting more recognition.
So I see that Kunal put a comment in the chat about Microsoft Teams. I'd be curious to know about how you find benefit in Microsoft Teams for this, Kunal.
Hey, Chris. Idea is here. First of all, Vignesh, I, and Gosde, we three are together over here, and because Vignesh was giving advice about the different kind of teaming softwares that you can use. So Microsoft Teams is one of them that we have actually explored both Slack and Microsoft Teams for project management. Now coming back to the software for simulation or any expensive softwares, what happens is that it is a subscription problems many times, that you cannot have those softwares. You can actually use it on so many computers. So for those kind of problems, what we do at the University of Rhode Island, and of course many industries they do too, that you can do a VPN remote access to a computer where the software is working. So essentially, you would provide your team members access to that software, and then you can use that expensive piece of software remotely from home. And that way, maybe, I don't know whether any simulation software can run in that way, but I believe you can do that. I mean, I would love to hear other people what they think about that.
Just a quick comment on, thank you, Kunal. Just another quick comment on the simulations. I have found when we have started to introduce textile simulations in the product development process, it is really helpful, actually, not just from an engineering standpoint, but also from a business development standpoint, to be able to cross that bridge and to show a customer, you know, this is the kind of problem that we're running into. We're working through it, but these are the characteristics that we weren't really quite able to meet. But, you know, through some more iterations or maybe adding in some design engineering changes, we can get there. So I find that the simulation process, the simulation softwares are kind of invaluable to be able to, not only from an engineering perspective, but also from an educational standpoint for customers.
Because seeing is kind of believing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And are we talking only about the simulation on the digital side, or also you are looking at the physical simulation of this textile performance testing?
We're trying to do both, actually. Sometimes it's just at the material level, and then other times it's trying to understand how these different stack-ups are stacking up together, rigid and semi-rigid and flexible components. There just isn't enough data still out there. So we're sort of customizing our own equipment, to be honest. But, you know, it's just an area that I see the value in the engineering standpoint, but I also see the value from a business development standpoint.
Yep.
It also sells it as next level thinking and not, you know, making pot holders anymore.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I saw Maddie put in a +1 for Teams. Maddie, what's been your experience with Teams?
Oh yeah, so we also signed up for Teams. Well, we switched over to Teams at the beginning of the year, and we try not to use platforms like Slack, which cause a lot of interruption. So I think that Teams one is really good for having a central repository of information, and it has some chat features, but they're not super disruptive, which was helpful. So we generally use OneNote, Outlook for email. So OneNote for note taking, Outlook for email, Planner for tasks, which were all Microsoft programs, Microsoft Teams for calls, and what else is there? I think that there's another program we use from the suite, but you can kind of do everything with one platform, which we really like. So that's oh yeah, if you're using, you know, Word or PowerPoint or any of those programs, they integrate really well. So yeah, that would be my +1 for Teams.
So Robert, I hate to put you on the spot, but I guess I need to ask, who here on the call has heard of something called BaseCamp? Anybody familiar with that?
No.
Robert, can you maybe talk about BaseCamp? It looks like Kunal is aware of it as well.
Right on.
Yeah, I'd be glad. BaseCamp is it's a software that grew out of a software development company based in Chicago. Used to be called 37 Signals, and they did web development and that sort of thing. And in managing those projects, they decided they needed a tool, and they built their own, which then became BaseCamp, which is now essentially what the company provides, is subscription-based platform for project management. Their whole philosophy from hiring to managing their company is as a remote organization and for asynchronous project management. So allowing people to work in different time zones at different times of day around flexible schedules. And so BaseCamp is designed to facilitate that. It's a fairly basic platform. So if you're somebody that likes lots of bells and whistles, you will maybe quickly tire of BaseCamp. But if you're somebody that says, we just need a simple, straightforward platform where we can place documents, where we can share messages, where we can collaborate. And as Maddie referenced, a lot of collaboration tools seem to be intent on disrupting whatever flow you happen to be in for periods of time. BaseCamp is not that way. It's a very straightforward subscription model. I think it's $99 a month for unlimited usage. So, you know, it's kind of a simple platform but based on the philosophy of being able to work remotely and asynchronously, it gives you the tools that you need. We've been having some success with it within IPC, and we're continuing to expand on its usage as we manage different projects.
So can I make a couple of comments on that too? Because I'd like to echo that.
Sure.
This is Claire at Propel, and we put in BaseCamp about 7 or 8 years ago because we're always managing. It's almost like our business, every new project we have is a new startup. And so I was looking for a project management tool, and at the time searched the whole industry and tried out the free month of all kinds of things. And we settled on BaseCamp. We're using something called BaseCamp Classic, which they discontinued maintenance of, or I should say upgrades to, some years ago. But I prefer it to the new one, partly because we figured out how to hack it and reorganize the way that they had organized it so it worked around our business culture and structure. And I was so glad that we had it in place when this happened, because it was completely seamless for us to move online because everything was online already. And my staff will tell you that, I'm kind of always saying, if you have a document on your hard drive, it shouldn't be there. It should be in BaseCamp. So we use it for every single document that relates to a project, all of the reporting, everything you can imagine. I've probably been on it half a dozen times today. It's $249,000 for the completely unlimited, but we must have, I don't know, well over 100 projects that we've had over the last 8 years. And some of them are in the archive. That never goes away. I search the archive regularly. And I love its search feature. I can put in just keywords and it'll turn out everything. Birgit set up this wonderful resources site within it where we cross-reference any material we come across from a trade show or a meeting. And so if I want to find something, just use a generic term, Kevlar or a para-aramid, and see everything we've ever touched with para-aramid, the system will spit it out. So I'm just very thankful that we had that organization, because I don't count myself as the most organized person. This has saved my life several times over. Highly recommend. There are other systems. Last year I went and looked and did a search again, should we move off it? Partly because we have to move forward, because we're a defense contractor. We have to do something called NIST 800, and then we have to move forward to this new cyber security level next year, which isn't that onerous, and frankly, every business should be doing it. It's called CMMC. And I wanted to make sure to see if there was anything that I thought would give us more, and I didn't find anything.
I'd like to just finish with, even if you aren't looking for a different platform for communication, I know that's the question that kind of sparked this discussion, but if you look for the books that the founders of BaseCamp, Jason Fried and David Hansen, have written, one's called Remote, one's called Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work. I think they've got 3 books out. They have a lot of philosophy and kind of tools around how to run a remote organization. And this is from a couple of company founders that have done it, over a decade from the beginning. That was their intent. There's a lot of things that you can learn about how to best manage and collaborate when we're in situations where we're not physically together.
Yeah, just to echo that, I've read some of their stuff over the years on the blogs, and in the second book, Work Doesn't Have to Be Crazy. And it's nice to do business with a company that has that kind of culture, because I'm a strong believer that your culture feeds into your products, and so that the person experiencing your product doesn't even, they understand the culture from the way they experience it, even if they never actually talk to you. And that is the kind of BaseCamp philosophy. They don't want to be the biggest or the best. They don't want to be the biggest or the craziest. They just want to do a really good job for all the companies that use them, and they do.
There is a one more tool. I just was chatting over there. I provided a Miro. That is a kind of very user-friendly collaborative tool for mind mapping and brainstorming. We have, I would say that the people who are very visual and they like to kind of draw on whiteboards and create your nice charts and organizational charts or maybe structures of your work, flow charts and everything like that, which you normally do on whiteboard, right? When you are in person. Now when you go into COVID, then you don't have those kind of resources that how you can have a collaborative drawing, because mostly you go on whiteboard and you write, but now you don't have that. So what we found in our lab, Miro, which students came up with this idea, and we did get the educational version of that. So we have kind of some advantage, but we found that to be really really helpful because it goes into extremely real time that people can work together and create a chart, which I take maybe 30 minutes to create a chart. With students, you would have like in 5 minutes the entire chart ready. So I was very impressed by the performance of Miro and how reactive it was.
I've been finding in my collaborations the real testament of how people are learning and how people absorb information. With being, through camera like I am now, and email, chat sessions with teams, and then at our company, we are kind of agnostic in the video communications, and so we're open to any video communication platform from wherever, from whomever, however we set up, including Zoom and GoToMeeting and Skype and everything else. So Amazon Chime. And so that's been a real challenge because information is coming from every angle. Whereas I think prior to COVID, it was mainly email and telephone. And my telephone has kind of slowed down a lot, and all these other on-screen methods have ramped up. So organizing information has been a key challenge. And these tools are good opportunities to help sort that information. Thank you. So back to some e-textile topics around commercialization, recognizing that there's been some distractions and postponements. Do you think, I think actually based off of Paul's presentation earlier, that there might be an acceleration actually in wearables, e-textiles used in health. And so I thought that was, kind of a positive light on this particular topic. But at the same time, with, issues with prototyping, hands-on, and maybe communication, the trajectory isn't fully identified, but the need maybe is now definitely identified. Does anyone have any inputs on the healthcare sector? Pratush, I might put you on the spot, knowing you've been involved in some areas of that market. The demand potentially is increasing.
Who were you putting on the spot, Stephanie?
I was going to say Pratush was still here.
I don't see him on the list right now.
Okay.
I would like to talk a little bit about this and would like to see whether people have comment on that. One thing definitely this morning we talked about was the development and testing of these devices designed from the textile materials, and also prototyping them. In e-health wearables, one of the major barriers and challenges are related to the human experiments, right? So you have to bring this technology on humans and actually validating this technology. Now it depends on what the endpoints are, but this is something during the COVID time. So I'm kind of restricting our conversation over here to the only COVID time. Of course, in before it was kind of easy that you can have a collaborator on the medical side and would be able to do some validation. But right now with the COVID, the restrictions are really tough at the human experiment side. So I was wondering that if anybody here has experience of how you are validating your e-textile wearables for healthcare applications.
Well, I mean, just speaking from our point of view, our human subject testing that is the next stage of a project we're doing with the Navy is just held up until they can reopen their human testing labs. So we are on temporary hiatus on that, and there's nothing we can do about it. We've done all of the simulation testing we could do with heart rate simulators, etc. So we're carrying on with more extensive testing on durability, which we can continue to do while we wait. And I'm thinking right now we're slotted for first quarter of next year. I don't think that's going to happen. We'll see. So it could be, who knows how long before we get to human subject testing.
Claire, if you need any help and there is any potential collaboration, let me know. We in any ways we can help you with the validation side of that. But of course, we don't go underwater, unfortunately.
Well, this isn't just underwater. This is in flight simulators and goodness knows what, and real environment. We've done the part that gets us to that point, and now they're like, okay, it's beyond the relevant environment, it's into the real environment. And this really, I think at that point, there's nothing you can do. There's a lot you can do in the lab until then. Right.
So Kunal, this is Andy Schimler with Battelle, and human factors testing and study design is also part of our business. And this COVID has been a significant impediment for that. But we found a way to adjust our protocols, and now we're doing a significant amount of our testing extending into the homes of patients and finding methods to collect our feedback from in-home evaluations with different modalities like video and audio, and even some remote controlled things. So we found a way after exploring a little bit to make some things work and continue our human subjects testing evaluations of products to allow the design cycle to continue.
Thank you, Andy. Just wondering that if I hear it correctly, so does it mean that you would be essentially giving the e-textiles or whatever those devices are, sending it home to the participants, and they would kind of collect data for you in remote settings?
Yep, that's exactly it. And we can we're doing in-home stimulation studies as well as evaluation of other products, and we're able to do it via video and other connected methods to get the feedback we need to allow design cycles to continue. So yeah, we're shipping product to them and allowing in-home evaluation, and then collecting the data like we would in our usability lab.
Excellent. Does that mean then you go with the, I'm sure you have figured out the whole way of training your participants and maybe how to maintain this device, how do you charge it and everything, right?
Yeah, training is a big challenge, and and sometimes part of the protocol that we evaluate is in following instructions for use. So there is some valuable feedback in more of a real-time environment than even we could witness in some of our usability labs.
Fantastic learnings, Andy.
Andy, I experienced something similar in non-military. user interface type studies where instead of bringing people to a central location, you contacted them individually and outwardly shipped your materials or your test products. And so that feedback is actually now more instant, and I think targeted and directed, and also is introducing even new user experiences, just because of the freedom of movement outside of that. And if you can account for that variation or extra input, it can be very helpful. One challenge, though, is some of team sports. Those type of things are regulated, and certain performance ideas that go through a professional team sports cycle might be interrupted or delayed because of the availability of on-field practices and certain rules and restrictions that just can't come into play because no one's playing or not enough. All right, well, this is kind of, it's been a good conversation. I thought that maybe there'd be a lot more challenges, but maybe since we're all feeling the same way, there's no sense complaining about it. I think sharing the idea about the tools and collaboration was really fantastic. Some of those tools I did not know about, and I could probably use them. So that's super helpful. I do have a question, maybe just from a show of hands, if everyone wants to use the hands. I think, has everyone on the call gone to some kind of PPE category in the past 6 months? I think it would be kind of fun to know on an e-textiles call how we've been shifted around over the past 6 months. And then remind ourselves what we're doing at this event and what we're learning, and not to let it go after this as we try to ramp up and get back to our industry practices and our e-standards committees and getting things moving forward.
Stephanie, if there's time for one question, just a quick one. Well, maybe not quick, I don't know. Is sustainability been a concern for people out there as far as just all the PPE that has to be used, and it's going to have to be discarded? A lot of that PPE is one-time use. What are people's thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, I know it's been a big topic in my world as a textile producer. And we're actually proud to be manufacturing textiles that can be washed and reused in the various PPE applications. Lots of times they don't fit the price point of the disposable products, and you have to start to justify a cost analysis of the reusable aspect of some of these products that can be reused. And that's sort of a, it's a soft decimal point, because it's just new conversations and new studies that you have to get. It's, in other industries, they call textile costs soft money, because it's always so intangible to get an idea of what it takes to get to market. And so in reusable textile products, that study is ongoing, and there aren't that many standards on reusable PPE. So I think it's just challenging overall in the company that I work for. I think that there'll be a lot of growth in nonwovens as we continue, and hopefully there'll be some efforts to utilize compostable type yarns that when it is disposed of, it will degrade.
Yeah, I mean, Propel has been deeply pulled into PPE. I think it's partly because we had such a strong relationship with the Department of Defense, and so we received some funding very early on in to assist in developing about PPE. I've also been involved with National Council of Textile Organizations, because we're a member of that, on their whole concerns about the PPE that is being bought and how it's not necessarily, the way things are being done is not necessarily supporting the US textile business. And I would just say that we, for a long time in the industry, have suffered from the essentially low-cost product that has flowed in, where the hospital systems have been hooked, is the only way to describe it, on disposables and not thinking about reusables. And I'm old enough and have been in this business long enough to have worked on reusable gowns, for example, when it was a thriving segment of the US textile business. And 20 years ago, it got completely undermined within a couple of years by very cheap non-woven products coming in from other countries. And I don't want to sound like I'm a protectionist. I'm not. I believe in a global economy. But I also know that we have created a bigger and bigger mound of toxic disposables that we're concerned about. So at Propel, we've made close to 2 million commercial reusable cloth face covers that we've shipped, and we're shipping every week, every day. And we've also turned our technical expertise into looking at what could come next. I do think that there are opportunities to combine PPE protection with e-textiles. I'm not quite sure what the products will be yet, but, and of course, then you get into this whole realm that was mentioned earlier today of FDA. Because all of those kinds of products, they're not currently regulating cloth face masks. They're allowed under an EUA, an emergency use authorization. But there will be a time when they start to become concerned about those and make regulations about those too. So it's an area, but the potential to, say, integrate sensing into it, or cooling or warming or whatever you want to do, that it's going to be something that we should look at. Right now we're still deeply in the pandemic and there isn't the time. So we were talking about how this has slowed down one side of our business, which is the e-textiles bit. And then on the other side, it's just been insanity. And I've never worked so hard. So if I can bring the two together, that would be really exciting. And anybody who's got ideas about that, I'm really interested in talking to you one-on-one as well.
That's really great feedback, Claire. Thank you so much. Yeah, I feel the same exact way. I have also never worked so hard understanding all of the various test methods and PPE products and end products and various aspects of the component manufacturing and how we can pivot to support that. And talk about an industry of opposites and challenges, from particle protection to breathability. They couldn't be more far apart. And textiles are doing their best. Well, nonwovens have done their best in managing that long awaited combination of performance. And since we haven't been involved in PPE for such a long time, we had to remind ourselves of all of those requirements and figure out how to do it all over again.
Thanks for those thoughts, Claire and Stephanie. And I was just going to add, I think we're all finding, obviously, that the term essential worker has expanded. It is our hospital care workers, of course, but it's the manufacturing workers too. So many of my colleagues have risked their lives and gotten sick, and it's just been really scary and heartwarming to see all these people pull together and try to manufacture so that the healthcare workers can keep going.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, the factories we've been working with to produce these masks, all in the US, we're using all US materials, of course, mostly made in Rhode Island, have just been fantastic. And the other thing is, these have been important jobs because we want to sustain this business. And one of the things that's going on that isn't really being talked about is that the Department of Defense is cutting orders on regular business for clothing and textiles because recruitment is down, because the recruitment centers aren't open, and just They're not doing as many exercises themselves, so they're not going through uniforms. There's all kinds of things. So you've got this potentially serious threat to the sustainability, the existence, I should say, of the cut and sew industry in this country right at the time we need it to be doing more. And I would advocate for a national policy on PPE, and it is sadly lacking. There is no national policy on PPE for domestic production because it's a security issue and we need to get that. So anyone who's interested in that, I'm interested in talking to them about that as well.
Let me know that if I can participate with something with you, Claire, because that is hugely important. And these trickle down challenges that happen and major markets dry up, and the U.S. textile industry is largely still the U.S. textile industry because of the military usage. So it's important that as things change with our military, that our U.S. textile industry can not only advance and grow, but just keep up.
Yeah, and the other thing about the defense sector is that it's also probably, well, it's definitely one that has funded a huge amount of the R&D in e-textiles that will affect everyone's life. It's really not just about the Department of Defense, but they're a significant customer. And they are relying on the US textile industry and the cut and sew industry, and whatever comes next, the new e-textile factory, which will be a merger of the two together. They're relying on that. They're relying on us to do that. But those businesses need to keep alive during this period.
That's right. And so much is lost if they don't.
We will be in trouble.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a good note or a bad note to end, Chris.
Well, this came up on those COVID-19 calls that we had over spring and summer. This was one of the early challenges. So just so everybody is aware, so back in spring, we were actually on one of our connectors guideline meetings, and the beginning of the meeting just shifted straight over to how the industry was responding to PPE needs for COVID-19. So what IPC did is we have a utility called IPC Works. It's an online collaboration tool that we use for committee development. And we actually use that for information exchange. So it was open to anybody to jump on. So we did a weekly, I think it was weekly at the time, we did a weekly web meeting similar to this. And then we had the online tool where people were sharing a ton of information. So, I think if there's interest within this group, then we can poll the group maybe a little bit later when we have more people on the call. If there's a need to reignite that, happy to do it as far as for the weekly calls, but also just to be able to give people access to that online community, because there's a lot of really good information that people were sharing up there.
Yes, it was a speedy location of PPE information for people that didn't know a lot about PPE. They could retrieve that. And new product information and sourcing information. I mean, I think it was just a very, very informative call each week, and then the updates and the connections even. Shout out.
Yeah, who knows Connie Huffa with Fab Designs, but man, Connie grabbed that thing and ran with it. So and she was really a fantastic catalyst for getting information up through the portal and out to people. So like I said, we'll put out a poll or a query when we have more people on the meeting, or maybe even in a follow-up, to see who would be interested in just getting signed on to the online group. There's no cost for it. This is a service that IPC is providing to the industry, even though this is outside of e-textiles, because it is affecting the e-textile supply chain. So I mean, something where we want to be able to use something that we have as a resource for industry to collaborate on things like that.
Outstanding. All right, gang, any more questions or PPE, COVID-related ideas and topics?
I have something to add. This is Salva Rashid. I work for Jabil. And past couple of months, I've also been working for, we've been also making masks and other PPE. So one of the most challenging things that I was working with the supply chain team. So basically finding all materials, and one of the most or biggest challenge was to find materials in USA. So that also showed how difficult it is to actually have a fully like a supply chain completely made in USA. And I heard Claire talking about producing in USA, and I would be interested to talk to her more about it, because I found it very difficult to find suppliers who have everything made in USA. In the end, we were able to find suppliers, and especially in the beginning, it was the worst when I contacted more than 200 suppliers, and then no one was having material, or they were already booked and no one had capacity to even take any more orders. But over the time, I think it has gotten better, and more people have, in a way, some industries have been affected. Some industries have also gained more business. So yeah, has anyone else also faced similar challenges?
Well, I would say to you that I would agree it's not necessarily easy, especially if you are not deeply embedded already. I suppose that's with the US supply chain, that's a little bit of the advantage that companies that do everything for the Department of Defense, because it has to be very compliant, which means grown, processed, and reprocessed fiber forward. We happen in Rhode Island to have a Rhode Island Innovation Textile Network, which has actually taken on a bigger role. There's a new organization called 401 Tech Bridge, which is linked to Office of Naval Research. And it's brought the Textiles Innovation Network together with the Composites Network, because we've also got a history of shipbuilding in this state. And then that's led to lots of very innovative composites companies. Anyway, I was able to lean on the Rhode Island Textile Innovation Network and long-term relationships. And the key piece for me was the nose stay. It was like, where am I going to get that? But we also have the remnants of the jewelry industry, the costume jewelry industry in this state. And for those of you who know the brand Alex and Ani, all made in Rhode Island. So I reached into the Rhode Island Manufacturers Association and found a guy who's just been amazing. We have all the elastic made, but there were things in short supply. And I remember sitting in my living room deciding I would order 500,000 yards of elastic in March before I had a single order, because I knew if I didn't place the order, I'd get cut out of the supply chain. And because that was the thing that was most difficult to get right then. So it was a little bit of like, what's available, talking to people, going back in the supply chain. I was worried about yarn because a lot of the chemicals coming in are from offshore. And we've had to juggle at times. I have an amazing young woman working for me who she's juggling right now on orders. I can see it going on. It's like, where am I going to get this material, that material? How am I going to put it together? But there are some great resources around. You just have to connect in. NCTO is a great resource for that. And Seams, all of those organizations can help too.
Yeah, I was surprised too. You mentioned the nose wire. That seemed to be the most difficult material to find, manufactured in USA completely, to be very compliant. And it is surprising that it is so hard to find. It seems like such a simple material or such a simple thing, but it's one of the most difficult things to find. Well, we had to look in a lot of different industries too, moving away from textiles, which are not doing traditionally textiles, and look in other industries like automotives and other industries to find materials who would make similar kind of materials, but with some tweaking, they could actually make things that would work for a healthcare product.
Yeah, good old-fashioned metal bender is what we went to. And there aren't enough of them left. He actually told me he'd had more fun figuring out how to do this than he'd had in the last 5 years, because he said the Chinese had taken all the fun out of his business.
I think that's also good for US industries and manufacturers in a way. It's bringing them some more orders and business, and reducing dependency on supply chain outside of US.
Well, thanks, Claire. All right, Chris, what do you say? Are we ready to move on to session sorely?
So if there's no other questions, I think this has been a good discussion.